Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Vote and Voice. I'm your host, Connor, and today we're beginning season two with a topic that has shaped politics across much of the world over the past decade, and that is populism. In this season, we're shifting the focus of podcasts beyond just political theory and ideas and into global political trends that are influencing Western democracies or other democracies and international politics and relations. And one of the most significant of those trends is the rise of populism. Populism has become one of the most frequently used words in political commentary. It appears in news coverage, academic research, and political speeches. But despite how often the word is used, many people are not exactly sure what it means. There are many definitions depending on how you see it, but populism is a political approach that frames society as divided into main groups, such as the people and the elite. So, populist leaders argue that ordinary citizens are being ignored, exploited, or betrayed by powerful institutions. These institutions can include governments, political parties, economic elites, media organizations, and sometimes even international organizations. This populist rhetoric tends to simplify complex political issues into a moral conflict. In this narrative, the people are portrayed as honest, hardworking, and authentic, while elites are portrayed as corrupt, disconnected, or self serving. And abuse of power, definitely. This kind of messaging can be powerful because it appeals directly to frustration and distrust that many citizens feel toward political institutions. In recent years, populist movements have gained influence across a wide range of democratic countries. And these include the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Italy, Hungary, Poland, and even Brazil have all experienced populist political movements or leaders gaining significant support. To understand why populism is rising, we need to first understand the conditions that make populist messaging resonate with voters. One major factor is economic change. Over the past several decades, globalization has reshaped many countries. International trade, automation, and technological change have created new opportunities, but they also have disrupted traditional industries. And manufacturing jobs have declined in many regions, particularly in parts of the United States and Europe. And in the United States in the 70s, manufacturing jobs took around 22% of all non-farming jobs. And in 2024, it's more like maybe 8%. So yeah, that's a big dip, and it shows how wage pressure and over the years there's been so much free trade that a lot of people just have had enough in this decade because communities that once depended on these stable industrial employment have now experienced some economic decline, job insecurity, and wage stagnation. What we have been seeing around the Western world over the years, it seems like our incomes have not gone up to inflation. Some countries may experience worse than others, but it's like, healthcare, housing, education, they've all really gone up. And a lot of us that relied on traditional stuff now, two people, husband, wife, two incomes cannot still make a certain class poor. But 100 years ago, like just the man of the house could pay like, the entire house. And that's only 20% of their entire income. Now it's more like 50%. So it seems like a lot of us have noticed that our housing costs around the world have gone crazy ever since, and the middle class just has struggled. And of course, lower classes, while the other people on top have never had it so good over the decades. That's another big problem with this free trade thing, is we've definitely been seeing some income and wealth inequalities. So yes, when economic change creates uncertainty, political dissatisfaction often grows too. So populist leaders frequently tap into this dissatisfaction by arguingly that political elites are allowed to globalize to benefit corporations and wealthy individuals while neglecting the needs of ordinary workers. You know, money over profit. Another factor contributing to the rise of populism is declining trust in institutions as well, and assuming that, oh, the government can't help us anymore. And in many Western democracies, public confidence in government, political parties, and media organizations has decreased over time. There have been instances like scandals, political polarization, and perceived government inefficiency that have made many citizens skeptical about whether institutions truly represent their interests. Populist leaders often build their campaigns around the idea that the system is fundamentally broken, that the economy is rigged, and they position themselves as outsiders who will challenge the establishment and restore power to the people. But it's not just economics, as immigration and cultural change have also played a role in populist movements, particularly in Europe and the United States. And yes, we will talk about this more in another episode. It's called the Great Replacement Conspiracy Theory and why some people believe this. And yes, it has to do with large migration flows, refugee crises around the world, and people who have experienced like violence or PTSDs, who have just want to seek for safety and they decide to go to the USA or Europe countries or other Western countries. Yes, demographic changes have triggered debates about national identity and nativism, cultural integration, and even border policy, as populist leaders often frame these issues in stark terms, arguing that political elites are ignoring the concerns of ordinary citizens about immigration. In these narratives, populist leaders present themselves as defenders of national sovereignty and cultural identity. However, it is important to recognize that populism is not limited to one political view, as there are many, as it could be left or right in this sense. So, for the right wing, populist movements often emphasize more nationalist and immigration control and skepticism toward international institutions, while left-wing populist movements, on the other hand, often focus on economic inequality, corporate power, and criticism of financial elites. Despite these ideological differences, both forms of populism share a similar communication style, as they emphasize a conflict between ordinary citizens and powerful elites. So now let's look at some examples of populist leaders and movements in recent years. So, for example, in the United States in 2016, Donald Trump had a presidential campaign that used strong populist language, saying like, "Oh, the economy is rigged," and his messaging frequently emphasized that political elites in Washington had failed ordinary Americans. And he also criticized international trade agreements and immigration policies, arguing that they harmed American workers. And in the United Kingdom, the Brexit movement that led to the 2016 referendum also included populist themes, as many supporters argued that the European Union represented distant bureaucratic control and that the United Kingdom should regain political sovereignty and full sovereignty due to concerns about like the pound and switching to the euro. And then across Europe, populist parties have gained influence in countries such as Italy, Hungary, and France, and leaders like Viktor Orban in Hungary and Marine Le Pen in France have built political movements that challenge traditional political parties and emphasize national identity and political independence. In Italy, the Five Star Movement emerged as an anti-establishment political force that criticized corruption and traditional political elites. So, populism has also appeared outside Western democracies. In Brazil, former President Jair Bolsonaro use populist messaging that criticize political institutions and emphasize direct appeals to voters. So these examples demonstrate that populism is not limited to a single country or political system, as it has become a global, powerful political phenomenon. And yes, populism can be very divided because populist rhetoric often frames politics as a struggle between the people and the elite. But it's not just the people and elite. These examples demonstrate that populism is, yeah, definitely intensifies political polarization, and opponents of populist leaders are sometimes portrayed as enemies of the people rather than simply political rivals. And this kind of language can make political compromise more difficult as democratic systems rely on negotiation, institutional trust, and respect for opposing viewpoints, and more parties involved. When political discourse becomes increasingly confrontational, those processes can weaken. Another concern that scholars sometimes raise is that populist leaders may challenge democratic norms or institutions because populist leaders claim to represent the true will of the people, and they may argue that institutions such as courts, media organizations, or legislatures are obstacles rather than essential parts of democracy. At the same time, it is also important to understand why populism appeals to so many voters. In many cases, populist movements reflect genuine frustrations that citizens feel about economic inequality, social inequalities, and political representation, and even social change, as ignoring these frustrations can make political divisions even deeper. Some political analysts and scientists argue that populism acts as a signal that democratic systems need to respond more effectively to public concerns, like getting more social and more involved. And the challenge for democracies is finding ways to address these concerns while still maintaining strong institutions and inclusive political systems. Looking ahead, populism will likely remain an important force in global politics, such as economic disruption, technological change, migration debates, and political polarization are not disappearing anytime soon. Understanding populism helps us understand how political narratives evolve and how leaders connect with voters during periods of social and economic change. As we move through season 2 of Vote and Voice, we will continue examining the political ideas and narratives that shape modern democracies. In future episodes, we will explore topics such as institutional trust, political polarization, conspiracy movements, and the global debate surrounding certain topics like immigration, globalization, and etc. So these issues are closely connected, and together they help explain why politics in many countries feels more intense and more divided than it did in previous decades. For now, the key takeaway is this: populism is not just about individual leaders, but it reflects broader social, economic, and political tensions with democratic societies. Understanding those tensions is essential if we want to understand where politics may be heading in the future. Thank you for voting voice. If you enjoyed this episode, consider following the podcast and sharing it to others who are interested in politics, society, culture, and global affairs. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.